What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 10-Minute Poker Tips. I got a special guest for you today, Christina Gollins, who is a mega pro professional poker player. She has 2 WSOPc rings. She has almost $1 million in tournament earnings. Much to the chagrin of the LA poker community, every time we have a big tournament, she's kind of mosey over from Vegas and win it. But we are glad to have her on the show today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, Derek. Really happy to be here, actually. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about my favorite topic, which is
live poker reads. So if anybody's ever actually sat at a table with Christina before and then she soul reads you in a really unsettling way, I'm glad that she's going to give away some of her secrets on the show today.
Yeah, not all the secrets because I usually charge for this. But I'll give you kind of baseline and things that I actually normally look out for. So for starters, every time I leave home base, which is Vegas, I am blown away by the information that players just hand out like candy. It's insane. LA is one of the top venues that is notorious for this. Hence why I love playing there. It's just it's fun, it's genuine too, and the vibes are there also. It's not the worst place. Durant, Oklahoma is the worst.
Oh, no kidding. You have to tell us about that on another show.
Yeah. You know, it is kind of a nice change to not have to stare at a wall when you're in Vegas. You know, you get so used to that. And when you're outside of that for even a second, you're like, whoa, people are actually like talking on the table. People are drinking. Like, what is going on? Like, I don't think you can ever really see one drink at a table in Vegas ever.
Okay.
If you're playing like a tournament that's like over like a 800, not one drink. Poor cocktail waitresses, right? They probably don't even make that much money. For starters, let's put the phones down. Let's just start there. One thing that is a lot different when you're playing in Vegas, people do have their phones down. Sometimes they have their headphones in. They are hyper focused. You can't even get away with like sneezing without somebody being like, what was that? Was that a tell? Like, what's going on? It's really important to remember to concentrate. I know it's hard because we do all have ADHD.
We do. I do.
To put the phones down, try not to play another tournament on your iPad while you're playing live. That's something that I still can't really conceptualize in my brain. Like, how the fuck are you playing 2 tournaments at once? Anyway, put the phone down and watch, especially when you're not in a hand. That is the best time to start watching. So typically, when I sit down at a table, I'm hyper focused. I start watching everyone. I start watching the way they breathe, their natural state. I, in my brain, start calculating what your natural state is. And that's typically when you're not in a hand. The reason for that is because we have naturally a lot of deviations when we are in a hand. And so you want to try to figure out those deviations. I watched Daniel Negreanu's masterclass, and dude's a fucking genius. He did say something that I actually disagree with, which doesn't happen often. But he did say something around the lines of, oh, if somebody looks down at their chips after they see a flop, that means that they have it, 1, 2, that they want to bet. And I don't agree with that. A lot of people are so different and everyone has different tendencies. And so just because you're looking down at your chips doesn't necessarily mean you have it. It doesn't mean that you want to bet. Maybe like you do that by habit for some other reason. It doesn't necessarily mean that if someone looks to the left or if they sniff or if they look down at their chips or whatever the hell it is, that it means this certain thing. The reason that you want to keep watching them is because you want to develop what their habits are, right? You want to understand what their habits are, what's consistent and what's not. And the most important way to confirm that you're right is to see the hands at showdown. So once you see what they have, then it's really important to go back and register everything that just happened. How did they bet? What did they look like when they bet? What was their body language? Were they leaning forward? Did they look relaxed? That's what's really going on in my brain when I'm sitting there silent. I'm not trying to be
Silent assassin. You're right. I've been tricked so many times by people looking down at their chips or leaning back. And sometimes people are giving fake tells because they don't know what the tells are. But it's really pattern recognition. You're right. You see a behavior, you need to see the result first before you determine something. And yeah, if you're in the first couple of orbits, you don't know people, and maybe you just go with the general one.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the biggest mistake that people make. I hear them all the time. Oh, I called you because you looked to the left. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Right. And then you do, like you said, have these meta mind games where you try to do reverse psychology, which is fine. And that's the other point that I wanted to harp into people is that, like, just as important it is for you to memorize and kind of observe everybody else, it's twice as important for you to have control of yourself and for you to have self-awareness at the table. Twice as important, because what you project on the table is not something that we normally subconsciously think about. We sit at a table, we do our thing. We're not really thinking of what we're portraying out there, what people are percepting. We just don't give a fuck. We're just like, I'm just going to play and I'm going to try to psychoanalyze you. But really, that's why in Vegas people are just like a fucking wall. They just don't want to give away anything, right? They're not talking, and it's not because they're rude or mean. It's just that they just don't want to give off anything. And so the easiest way to do that is just to be a statue. Yeah, because a lot of people just can't control it.
So what are your tips, I guess? We definitely want to be statues without like slowing down the game. But what are some of your tips for people to control their tells and their behaviors?
That's a good question. Let's start with, you want to be aware of the way that you bet, the way that you look when you bet, the way that you look when you're all in. We'll start there. Basic. 3 things that you want to really concentrate on. Everything else that you do outside of a hand really doesn't matter.
Sure.
You want to pay attention to the hands that go to showdown, your hands that go to showdown, right? Because everybody else is calculating what that just meant. So say, for example, you overbet on the river, hand went to showdown, and it was a bluff, okay? Now everyone's going to think that when you overbet on the river, you 2x river, that more than likely when you overbet, it's going to be a bluff. So that's where the meta mind games can come into play, where the next time that happens, maybe it's an hour or 2 later, depending on how much you think that the table is paying attention, you can play the meta mind games. Be careful though, because like you said, we all know that we're playing meta mind games.
Yep.
So it could work to your disadvantage, but that's why it's important to stay consistent. I sort of just stay consistent. I'm just aggressive 100% of the time. And 2x potting, whether I have it or not, you fucking figure it out.
So, I mean, like, that is a nice way to do it, is if you're always aggressive, then there is some consistency in the way that you play. I mean, do you ever ask other peers? Do they ever get like a tell on you? Do they ever like see anything?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I ask all the time.
And have you learned a lot from that?
Yes, I actually have a funny story about this, but before I get to the funny story, I do ask people that are very close to me.
Okay.
Because I don't want them to use it to their advantage a lot of times, and because I don't want some stupid answer. I don't want them to be like, oh, you look to the left or whatever. But I do know that, and we'll get to the parts where I had leaks too, and we'll talk about that. I still to this day have fucking leaks. To be honest, those are the days where I go in not super attentive, not super in it. I'm a little bit more relaxed, and it kind of happens with tournaments like under 1100s, like, you know, we're here for fun. With like bigger tournaments, we lock in for the most part, but still some shit happens. And yeah, I had leaks. The funny story is that I think it was last year. It was the very first tournament. It was of WSOP in the summer. It was the 5K freeze out. I'm at Chance Kornuth's table, which I played with Chance several times. And the thing about Chance, I don't want to say whether I agree with this or not, but what he does, he is a fucking maniac at the table, and he's so uncomfortable to play with because he does have his training site, right? He does do a lot of GTO. Naturally, he's a field player.
He is absolutely a field. People don't understand how much of a field player he is. Yeah.
To a level that's so uncomfortable, and he is the only person, I promise you, the only person that makes me feel uncomfortable at a table up until this day.
Wow.
There's no other person that can make me feel the way Chance does. And the reason being is he goes so out of his way to make you feel uncomfortable and to break you from, no, for real, from your natural state. And the way that he does this is time, okay? He's very consistent, and I'll give him that. And every single time I play with him, doesn't matter if it's a 600, doesn't matter if it's a 10K. He does this every time, and it works. What he does is that he sits there and he watches you. If he's facing a bet or an all-in, whatever it is, even though he's made up his mind like 5 days ago, he will still sit there for, I kid you not, 3 minutes. 3 minutes just to watch you. And what this fucker does is he sits back in his chair, okay? looks relaxed. He has his cards and he's just staring at you. And he's scooting back so that he can see your entire body. And he's scanning everything. Not just waist up. He's looking at your legs. He's looking at your feet. He's looking at your chest to see, and he's looking at your neck to see the pulse, right? Naturally, we don't get to that state of fear. Maybe it's anxiety. We don't get there naturally until I would say about 1.5 to the 2-minute mark is when the overthinking starts kicking in. It's when the natural response starts kicking in. What are they thinking? Are they going to call me? Whatever it is. And you can't really tell if somebody's bluffing or not until you get after that state.
Wow.
And he knows that. And so he waits.
You're being given enough time to run through all the combos and stuff that they might have. And then you're just like, well, they haven't folded already. Now I might be in trouble. And then you start unintentionally squirming a little bit. And all of a sudden, now you're screwed.
Yeah. So that's why I say I don't necessarily know if I agree with the ethics of it, especially in something under an 1100. It's actually kind of annoying to sit there and have somebody tank for 3 minutes every single hand. And he uses it to his advantage because he knows that that's annoying. Props to him, because I've tried to do this one time. It lasted like 1:15. I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, this is so awkward. This person's going to think that I'm hitting on them. It's just one of those things where like, I think that it works to his advantage. He loves to do it. He's just a psychopath. When he did it to me, when we were in this one hand in the 5K where I clicked bluffed him, basically we had starting stack. This was like the first fucking level of the tournament. It was button versus big. I knew what he was doing. I knew that he was just trying to bully me out of the hand. And I know that when Chance overbets, he doesn't have it. So he overbets river. I click him back. That basically puts both of us almost all in. We have both starting stack. First hand of the fucking tournament.
Oh my God.
I know. And he knows in his head, because he has queen high, he told me later, that he's folding. He wanted to just like make me feel max pain. So he sits there for like, I'm not kidding you, 4 minutes. And I eventually just look at Chance like 2 minutes in and we make eye contact. And I'm just like, is this you asking for my number? Like, what is going on?
That's a good counter. It's a good counter.
Yeah. And he just doesn't respond. That's why it's uncomfortable for me.
He's a psychopath. He really is a psychopath. My God.
Yeah. And normally I can break people and get them to giggle or something, or at least smile. He doesn't break at all, this fucker. So this is why he's uncomfortable to play with. Anyways, he ends up folding and we talk about it later off the table on the break. And he's just like, what'd you have? What'd you have? What'd you have? I'm bluffing with the best hand. I have king high. Like, you probably just have like queen jack, queen 10 there, right? He's like, yeah, I have queen 10. I'm like, okay. So now that I gave you what you wanted, you have to tell me what my tells are, because you just psychoanalyzed my entire soul. And just tell me what it is. And he's like, you check differently.
Wow.
And I was like,
that's huge.
Okay.
That's huge, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's right. He's right in the fact that I do check differently. It was like 10 minutes into that tournament to where I did do 2 different types of checks, but I both didn't have it. And so that's one thing that like also it's important to stay consistent, but like also, you know, you got to pick up if it means anything, right? My 2 checks meant that I didn't have it.
Right. It's an important point you're making, though. There should be a baseline of consistency, because I don't actually know if I'm checking differently. Like, I'm probably just doing something subconsciously. I'm pretty sure some of the pros in LA have picked up on my tells. But yeah, if you can build that baseline and then you can start exploiting it, right, the other way, because then you can start giving stuff away. But if you don't have that right baseline, you're probably just all over the place. But that's huge for Chance to give you that information.
It was. I had to actually pry this out of him. Like, I had to beg. I was like, please.